Good morning and welcome back to our teen Sunday school class. I feel like I haven't sat here in a while because
You weren't here last
3
week.
weeks?
yeah, well, and I think the
Week before that, we didn't have Sunday school because
Yeah.
we went too late.
yeah, and so it's good to be back.
Wait, didn't we? Weren't? Was it the week before that? I thought something happened the week before that.
Yes, there's 2 weeks that
Yeah.
I wasn't here, and then
Yeah.
a week that we
Oh,
had an awesome service.
Yeah.
I mean, we usually have more than just 1 week of awesome services.
Right.
But this one went over into Sunday school.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have Sunday school class.
But here we are.
But we're here. So we're going to get back into talking about the miracles that Jesus performed. And I was trying to find what was the most unique miracle that he performed. Can anybody guess what it was?
Most unique.
Yes.
Spitting in the man's eyes is pretty unique.
No, that's just gross. That's what.
I mean,
Unique.
I would say the feeding of the 5,000 is unique, but that's kind of
He did it
he did
two
it twice.
times,
So.
yeah.
Yes.
Raising Lazarus, no, he raised other people from the dead.
He only did this one time.
Yeah. Healing woman of the issue of blood. We already talked about that though.
That's pretty unique.
Yes.
Walking on the water. Did he do that once or twice?
He did that multiple
Yeah, he did it
times.
multiple times.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Oh man, I just thought of one, and then before you said anything, and now that I know the conclusion was closer to what I thought it was, now I don't remember what it is. Unless I'm completely wrong. Hold on. Unique
He did a
miracle.
lot of his miracles more than once.
Yes.
I shouldn't have made that
This
joke
one-
about the spitting in the man's eyes, because I had it before that, and then I thought about the man spitting his eyes, and now I can't think of anything.
This miracle he only did one time. If consider it.
Is it told a lot? Like, did we talk about it a lot?
Yes.
Okay, well.
Talk about all of them. What's the name?
Raising
Water.
himself from the dead.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was gonna say if when I said it, you're gonna be like, oh, I knew that.
Yeah.
Yes, because I was trying to figure out if they would give me like just a specific one, and the specific one that they gave me was him raising himself from the dead. Yep. And honestly, that is pretty, unique because
No one else on this earth was capable
of doing that. Raising other people from the dead, Elijah, Elisha, who else? Keeping people from dying,
Yeah.
Samuel. I mean, you think about all those, but none
None raised themselves.
raised themselves.
Yeah.
Yes, none raised themselves from the dead. I don't know why I had to think about that.
Grammatical nightmare.
Yeah,
to
it is,
say. None raised themselves.
Yes, yes. And so, but to me, it's pretty unique, and it's always talked about. And
Yeah.
because he said, although they didn't think that's what he was saying, they took his words out of context. And he said, tear down this temple, and in 3 days, I rebuild it. And they're like, oh no, he's about to destroy the temple.
Right.
Oh no, that's not what he was saying.
Finished.
I know, right? That's not even what he was saying. But he said, I will rebuild it. And I'm just like, yep. I understand, why he said the way the way he said it. But that was one of, I was trying to look at other ones, but they just kept saying his resurrection. And, which it is, it's pretty unique because he did it himself. Nobody went and prayed at his tomb and asked for him to be raised from the dead.
True this video. Do it yourself. Do it yourself miracles.
Yeah. Well, he didn't have anybody. And then when they were coming to pray for him, he wasn't there. So, but that was I just figured out something that was unique or whatever. That was, I don't know. All right, let's get back to our healings. Our last healing we talked about was.
You know, sometimes when it comes to Jesus, people in the Bible just talk like, you know, we don't give them enough credit because they really sound dumb. Because, like, as far as what we know, because we know what Jesus meant when he says all this, because we have all the prophecies and we have, you know, what happens later. But
like,
really,
how could they
had.
not know this when
Yeah,
they're, you know?
they're like, when Jesus, it's just like, to
It's
them,
funny.
he's just walking around just talking gibberish. I'm going to destroy the temple and rebuild it
Because they
again
didn't
in 3 days. You know, and it's
They
just,
didn't have the
yeah.
vision to understand.
it really did sound like
no,
he was
they
crazy
didn't.
about
But
stuff.
what about, about that, yes. What about the things that the prophets wrote about? Did they just disregard those? Or the thing, they looked at the books of Moses. Did not those have any type of hints or anything
A little
about,
bit, yeah. I mean,
you know,
well, like,
I read the books of
I think
Isaiah.
when you
Jeremiah.
imagine,
Yeah.
like, everybody's talking about what, this amazing teacher, and he's supposedly the son of God, and then he's just walking around talking about, I'm going to tear down this whole thing that took 180 or how many years to build, and
Well, he
build
only-
it in 3 days.
well, he only did that one time, though. That's what he was saying in front of them.
And that's the thing, is that all that kind of stuff, like being born again, that was all new. But since a lot of, when you read the Bible, you know all about that. You're like, oh, come on, Nicodemus, what do you mean? He's obviously, what he's talking about here is, and they had no idea.
Well,
It
he
was so
didn't.
new.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He didn't know.
Because
So
nobody
he thought,
ever
when
said
you
that
say
before.
when you're born again, so that means I gotta go back to my mama belly.
Right.
That's what most unsaved people would say.
Because all of our
They'd be like,
lives we've heard become a born again Christian. Be born again,
Yes,
you know?
Yeah.
and so
And it's just
the only way
layman's
you
terms.
know that you were born is from your mama's belly,
Right.
and so that
So
makes
that was the
sense
natural
that
response.
yeah.
for him.
And so, but then once he like fully got the concept of what Jesus was talking about, then although he already considered being born again anyway,
Right.
but he was like, after Jesus, it was a different consideration.
Compared to Jewish law, it had nothing to do with it whatsoever, and for the most part, as far as normal Jewish, rules and customs and stuff, that wasn't a thing. It was all about, putting your sin on a sacrifice rather than being the sacrifice. As far as putting yourself behind you.
I wonder how do you think the phrase born again?
He became the first.
Yeah, like how did it
I
gain
know.
popularity? Because if he said it to Nicodemus in a private conversation,
It wasn't so private because who records it?
John.
that's true.
Who was
So-
always with Jesus?
Well, we did this
'Cause it's
Word
recorded
of
in John,
Truth
right?
seminar, and one thing that was brought up that I thought was very interesting is the different writers that were in place, or the different people who were having
Yeah.
the books written to them. As far as Matthew was
wrote
written for the Jews,
Marcus for the Romans,
and John, Lucas for the Greeks,
And
John is
was
for the Christians.
But John was all over. I
think John was written for the Christians, and that's why he has such a loving view of Jesus, because that's what they're interested in.
yes.
As far as they're not quite more, interested in what exactly he was always, doing.
Right.
They're more
I
interested
am,
in the,
because
John's
reading
entire
John's,
book is,
yes.
it's a love
Right.
letter to the early church.
Yeah.
Right.
And-
It's who Jesus was, more so than just what miracles he did.
Mhm.
And, all
I was
of
gonna
that.
say, I think John is one of my favorites. Reading his,
John is probably my favorite book of the Bible, honestly.
well, just reading how he,
His perspective
yes.
is so interesting.
and knowing that he was close to Jesus, so his perspective was going to be more interesting than the ones that just heard about it.
And he would view things like Jesus would because
Yeah.
he had Jesus' constant company and input, and
True. All right, so I believe the last miracle we talked about was the impotent man, right? Or was it? It's been 3 weeks.
I think it was the spitting in the eyes guy.
Yeah, we didn't get all the way through that.
Oh yeah, we didn't. We didn't.
We
get
just
to
read
the
Oh, the
last
blind
part.
man, the man born blind.
Yeah.
What was it?
All right.
Well, we kind of talked about it, but not very much.
Not very
Because it's a
much.
whole chapter and there was a ton to talk about.
That's what it was. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's go back to that one. Where is it at? Sight restored to a man. Was it Luke or was it
I
Mark?
have no idea. I don't remember.
Go to Mark 8, 22 through 20. No, it was a whole chapter.
Yeah, it
It
is.
seemed like.
It was.
It
Well,
was.
they
So
had
in that case, it's John.
That's what I thought.
That's what I was thinking.
It's John. John would be the one that gives the whole big old. Was it John?
Yeah, because I remember he
Chapter
went in the
9.
temple.
Yeah.
All right.
Because it was like a whole. Because it's like, oh, we can say a lot more about that then.
Mm-hmm.
We could paraphrase it because you already read it.
Yes, we did read it
3
through.
weeks ago, but still.
Where okay.
Go watch that again if you need that context.
Yeah.
Where
read
did
it-
we
actually
stop
read
at
it.
though? Did we read the whole thing though? I don't think.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Well, did we?
I thought so. I thought we read this but didn't really talk about it. 'cause
Yeah,
that was when
we
were
read
waiting.
through it, but we didn't discuss a lot of it.
I just
Okay,
took some,
I remember talking about verse 30. The man answered is when they're asking him, and he said, the man answered and said unto them, why herein is a marvelous thing that ye know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened mine eyes. Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshiper of God and doeth his will, he heareth. Since the world I remember us talking about the blind man giving
yeah, I don't think we got
some wonderful words to the Pharisees.
And I love it because the Pharisees were trying to trap him
Yes.
into getting kicked out of the synagogue, and he just says, if this man were not of God, he could do nothing.
Yeah.
So he didn't really even say, he didn't say directly, this man is, he didn't say this man is of God. He said, if this man were not of God, he could do nothing. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. I feel like that's such a good way to word that in the face of such pressure to answer corruption.
I think we did read it, but we were just going back. Because I remember the last thing we were having a discussion about is how the man that was born blind was talking about Jesus to the Pharisees. He didn't even really, not really saying that he didn't know who he was, but
he didn't know who he was.
No, but he didn't know who he was. He
just
probably
said, this
heard.
man is of God.
Yes, and so right then, he believed in who he was, and just the words. It's just the wisdom of this man and how he just talks, and just I don't know. It was amazing to me.
That one experience after. I mean, I would imagine after an entire life of being, like, not being able to see, you'd notice a lot more.
True.
I would. But
yeah, I mean,
a lot to
it
think
says
about,
he was born blind,
never
seeing anything.
And like after that long of being blind, and then having a direct experience with Jesus. It says a lot about what having an experience, like, in close contact with Jesus was like, that this man had the wisdom to respond that way after only having met him once, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's like a person being saved who was not even around anybody that went to church, even considered going to church. Their life was just all party.
Sometimes
or
new Christians are a lot more insightful than people who have been Christians
for a long time. Yes, and so this is how that man who was born blind was. And of course, as soon as after he says this, they answered and said unto him, thou wast altogether born in sins, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out. They got mad at him. He, being blind, they said he was born in sin because he was blind.
And at the beginning, Master, who did sin this man, or his parents, that he was born blind.
Yeah, that's what it was taught in Judah, is that if someone sinned, then they would. And I think, I don't know how you would sin and be born blind, but
kind of a dumb
parents,
question.
I would imagine it would be something to do with like before marriage, than something like that. But it's a weird way to take it.
That is the people that are impotent.
Yeah, imagine
Right.
like us doing that with
Why is that
people with
sin?
birth defects now, just being like,
Yeah.
oh, it must have been their parents or them sinning or something.
Yeah, why is that? Why would that be considered a sin? Some people's genes aren't.
Yeah.
And that's the way the Lord wants
That's the
it.
thing is, there's so many people being born that you're gonna get a bad. I hate to say a bad egg, but like you're gonna eventually there's going to
Something's
be
gonna
something because it's so much. There's so much DNA in the body that at some point there's going to be a few little mistakes here and there.
And that's how it is. It's the
Usually
fault of
everybody
no.
has some,
Right,
but usually
no.
there's so much DNA that usually it doesn't pop up as far as there's a few faulty mistakes, but in some it's more pronounced.
Well, so they thought this man had sinned because he was born blind, but the Pharisees got mad at him.
Well, and that's kind of funny wording too, because technically they were all also born in sins, but they're like, that was
But we
together
are
born in
just
sins and
and
just don't
high.
teach us.
Yes.
Self-righteous.
Self-righteous Pharisees.
You know that's when they didn't have an answer either. Like they didn't
Yes.
respond to
No, they
anything.
just went back to.
And I feel like I've heard that way too much. Like as far as when it comes down to it, you don't have a response. Instead, you focus on who the person is, and like saying like, "Oh, you shouldn't be able to talk," about this. And usually that means you don't have an argument to that. You're just focusing on the person, saying that they don't have any right, and that usually means they're right. Not in every case, but they go to him like, "Oh, look at that! You can't teach us. We're good people." And
Yeah. Well, in this case, the man that was born blind was right, and they were very offended and got mad, and they cast him out.
And he wasn't really saying anything that like he was just saying, I don't know. So it wasn't quite basic principles, but it was common sense stuff like that you would know.
That's
You
what
should
I'm
know.
saying, because
Like if he wasn't
he
of God,
didn't-
he wouldn't be able to do anything. That's obvious. But they didn't
Right.
want to see that. And also, it's kind of interesting how a man being born blind all his life is so verbally active as far as his responses are good. He makes a very good point.
Sight doesn't impact it.
Well, I know that, but I'm just saying he didn't have
It's
a lot
like-
of life experience as far as that because he was begging the whole time. He probably wasn't having a lot of, conversation all the time, but he probably had a lot of time to think.
Maybe he did because
Who knows?
maybe some of the people he was around
Yeah, I don't know.
had conversation because
But he sure wasn't talking to Pharisees all the time.
Right, that's what the reason they were upset about him teaching them is because he was making a good argument.
yeah,
And they viewed him as that much lower than them that they
which
were
is
like,
not
oh,
okay.
no, it's never okay.
People in authority always hate people trying to get out of their authority, or at least even having ideas that could make their authority invalid.
And specifically, this man because they hated Jesus. So him voicing
And he wasn't really
voicing
saying
his
Jesus.
even indirect support for Jesus was an
Yeah.
offense to them
Because
already.
he wasn't saying that Jesus is great. He was just saying that even if he's good or not, he has to be good because if he wasn't good, then he wouldn't be able to do anything.
Right.
If he wasn't good, he wouldn't be able to do anything.
Okay, so as he is cast out, it says, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said unto him, Dost thou believe on the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? And Jesus said unto him, Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. And he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. So, after they cast him out, he just probably went. He probably had to find
went on his
a
way.
whole new
Yeah.
routine of doing stuff.
Because
Because
at
now
this
he
point,
can see.
his parents had disowned him,
Yes.
and he could see.
Yes.
Then
So-
he's cast out of the synagogue.
And he was cast out of synagogue. Well, but Jesus heard about it and found him. And that's another thing too, is he didn't even know who Jesus was. Yet he believed in him.
Because Jesus literally did it in a way that the man wouldn't have seen his face.
Yes.
He spit in the clay, put it on his eyes, said, Go wash in the pool of Siloam.
Yeah.
Jesus is not at the pool of Siloam. So, if you think about it,
His voice too.
if you think about it, maybe Jesus was in a way trying to just let the man go and not have him have to be cast out of the synagogue.
Right.
But
But
since
he
he
did have
defended
it.
Jesus
That's
of
when
his
they,
own choice,
Well,
that's when they
It's like when the thing I always think is that in a lot of these kind of things where even if people only hear his voice, and then later they like don't like Mary in the garden. I think he changes it to their ears, their ears, so they don't recognize
the
him.
people on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him at all.
And there's no way.
Wasn't one of them the husband of one of the people who was there when Jesus was on the cross?
Yeah, I think.
I believe so.
So I mean, you know what I mean? Like in this case where he heard his voice, but then later he didn't know exactly who he was, and you would think, oh, if it's Jesus' voice, you'd recognize it. But I think he hid himself to them because he didn't have to directly, be like, go wash in the pool of Siloam, but then he talks later in his normal voice. He just makes it work. It's like when he passed through the middle of those people who are going to stone him, and that's who they were looking for. They were going to stone him, and then he just walked out of the crowd and just left. I think he kind of hid himself from them so they wouldn't notice, or at least from their minds.
Imagine how confused the poor blind man was, though. Because he doesn't know what's going on, and all of a sudden he feels like wet clay on his eyes, and then is told to go watch. Like, what do you think he thought was going on?
The sounds.
Well, but it told him what he was going to do, right?
Yeah.
He had thus spoken, and he spat on the ground and made a clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said unto him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sent. He went his way therefore and washed and came seeing.
So it doesn't even say that he encountered Jesus after. What do you mean?
Like, it says, because he said, in verse 11, he answered and said, a man that is called Jesus made clay. But how did he know his name?
Who wouldn't?
Well, I mean, he probably wouldn't because he didn't know who he was later.
But he said a man that is called Jesus.
If Jesus and his disciples were walking by this man, you remember what happened with blind Bartimaeus. He was Jesus, the son of David. So there were probably people.
Well, he heard about him, but he would have heard the rumors and known what was going on. But later, when he's talking to the Pharisees, it sounded like he had no idea who the guy was. He's just like, if he was really of God. So I'm wondering if somebody told him, he's like, hey, what's going on? There's somebody spitting on the ground and putting clay on my eyes. And they're like,
well, I was going to say this too. Somebody could have told him who it was. Right. Because it doesn't give the timeline.
Go see his neighbor.
Right, it doesn't give the timeline between. Somebody helped him get there.
So they're like, he's like, who did that? Who did that? I want to go punch him or something. And then he had no idea.
I overthink things a lot. So I would have been like, what just happened? Is he making fun of me? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, because you can't see.
That just seemed like you'd be making fun of him.
You know?
Well, it doesn't give you a timeline either between
dirt in his eye.
the different things, so you don't really know what or who, but know that somebody told him that it was Jesus, and he's like, this man named called Jesus. You just know that that's what they call him. So that is almost saying he didn't even know who he was at all.
You saw like ask somebody, hobbling to the pool of Siloam.
So he didn't know who he was. He didn't know who he was, yet he defended him and believed him. And then when Jesus asked him, he said, who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? Because he already believed in him, not even knowing who he was. And then he told him, and he said, Lord, I believe, and worshipped him. Just like that.
Just immediately. I would have. If a man came along and restored, well, not even restored, gave me sight. Because he never had the sight.
No, he didn't have any sight at all. And so
Jesus said, for judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words, and said unto him, are we blind also? Jesus said unto them, if you were blind, you should have no sin. But now ye say, we see, therefore your sin remaineth. So he's automatically disproving what the Pharisees and his disciples unknowingly said about sins having impact on how you're born.
See, and that's the thing, is that this is one of my favorite parts of this whole thing, and maybe one of my favorite miracles in that respect, is that it would work so well in film. Because he's like, Lord, I believe, and he worships him, and then zooms out, and then goes to, and Jesus just turns to the camera.
It's a full circle.
Yeah, Jesus just turns to the camera and just goes, for judgment I come to this world, that they might be made blind. And then it just pans over, and there's some Pharisees standing there like, are we blind?
Yes, they were.
And then Jesus,
obviously they were blind, because they although not necessarily blind, but they chose not to see.
Right.
Whereas the blind, they can't help that. The Pharisees, they made themselves
Well,
blind.
and it's not that they are blind; it's that they say they're not. And that's like a lot of the news is like that. We're like, we're not biased, and they are. And it's the same kind of thing where you're being a hypocrite, and that was the point. Is it's not exactly what they're doing; it's that they're saying they're not blind.
Right.
Whether you are or aren't blind physically, we're all blind spiritually at some point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we acknowledge that and have Jesus and get a relationship with him and get close to him, then that's what opens our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying, oh, we're not blind. We know all about the law. You know,
Right.
that does nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But
Reading, just reading the Bible throughout your life, you always seem to find something new that sticks out to you. Well, I read that passage before, but there was something in there though that I didn't see when I read it the first time, or the second, third, fourth, fifth. How many different times?
To you that hasn't spoken to you before,
Right.
because of like some experience you had or something like that. You know.
And so, but this blind man never at all. Yeah, he believed in God, believed in Jesus, and worshipped
Didn't even
him.
have to think twice.
Didn't even think twice about it. So that is the end of our Sunday school class. We didn't have a lot of time and stuff today, but we just wanted to finish off that miracle. Pray that the Lord will open my eyes, open your eyes, and let us see how great and how wonderful he is, and just all the things that he's done for us, and that we wouldn't be blind, that we don't choose to be blind because we don't want to believe, but that we just receive it immediately. All of us just need to pray and just ask the Lord to help us to just believe, because talking about this blind man, he was born blind, and immediately he believed Jesus, and what he did for him was a wonderful miracle. So we just hope that you enjoyed our Sunday school, and pray that you will be with us in our Sunday morning worship.